Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another one of our free Friday community classes. For this one, I hiked up into one of my favorite spots so that I could sit outside and we could enjoy the sounds of nature and the light of the rising sun so that we can talk about something that technically probably should be an advanced class, one of our monthly advanced classes, but I have been thinking about this a lot and I really wanted to share on it. So we're going to turn it into one of our weekly free Friday community classes and have some fun with it. Normally, I don't do my classes this way, but this week I have notes because I want to stay on topic. I want to make sure that I cover all the things that I want to cover. So with that, let's get into it. Here's what we're going to talk about today. First and foremost, we're going to talk about what positive affirmations are, what mental atmosphere are. I'm going to give you my definitions and then the way that we're going to define these things for the sake of this particular class. I'm going to share with you why I think these things work, why they don't work, and how they work. What are the inner mechanisms of affirmative work? Then we are going to talk about how plants and our work with the plant spirits can empower, in other words, affirm our affirmations in this work. And then I'm going to share with you my own process for doing affirmation work. So this is one of those classes where if you don't stay till the end, you're going to miss some important nuances, some important sort of asterisks about this content. So please stick around so that you don't walk away with half the story, because there are some interesting caveats to this that I think when it comes down to kind of making or breaking it and also making this work as inclusive and accessible as possible, we have to have all these different points of discussion, which is, again, why I printed out notes this week, which I normally don't do. So please excuse me glancing at my notes, but I want to make sure that I cover all the stuff that I want to cover. So with that, let's get into it. First and foremost, what is an affirmation? Again, these are my definitions. This is how I experience this work. For me, an affirmation is saying what you want to be true as though it were true. So we're making statements in the present, in the positive, with clear intent, and ideally we're onboarding as much of our being as possible. So when we're saying something like, I always have enough, just saying it kind of in this robotic way is not an affirmation. We have to have the emotional feeling that comes with it. The body has to be on board. The mind has to be on board. The internal visualization, if you work that way, has to be on board. The physical body, as much as ourselves as possible, needs to be engaged in the process of affirmation. And affirmations, in essence, are a lie, right? We're saying something as though it were true that is not yet true. And a lot of people get hung up on this. I get hung up on this sometimes, and I have to kind of talk myself back down into the reality of it. And the way that I do that is to remember that affirmations are a ritual, right? And when we see any kind of ritual, we always see theater. We see pretend, make-believe. We see people acting things out in a ritual setting, using words and phrases and actions, ritual actions that are not necessarily true. A lot of our rituals are designed to recreate the cosmos or to explore the narrative of a particular deity. I think about the Eleusinian mysteries of Persephone and Demeter. Those people are not actually living those experiences. They are playing them in ritual, right? In ritual theater. And so when I remind myself that affirmation is ritual, that I am pretending, make-believing, whatever, to create the space in which my magic can happen, then it starts to click together and make a little bit more sense for me. Affirmation is anchored in things said, generally, or sometimes in things contemplated. So we generally see these little pithy, poetic, rhythmic, sometimes rhyming, or sometimes really powerful statements like, I always have enough, or I am free from this particular situation, or I am experiencing this particular feeling. And that's very important, because when we get into why affirmation work is not new, it's not new agey. It can definitely get new agey, but why this idea of affirming what is not yet true to make it true is not a new thing. We're going to talk about that in a minute. It's very cool. This idea of kind of being able to craft these little one-liners, these little poems, these little charms, these little incantations and verbal spells, see where we're going with this, is so important. So that's my definition of affirmations. I also want to talk about mental atmosphere. We call PMA sometimes, right? Positive mental atmosphere. So what is PMA? It is, I like to think about mental atmosphere as the weather happening inside of my body, right? We say mental, but I really mean subtle, right? Like, what's the weather inside of my being? And this is important because when we're doing affirmation work, certain atmospheric conditions are more suitable to the growth of magic than others. So if we have a little bit of rain, that fertilizes the land. If we have too much rain, it floods. If we have a little bit of wind, it carries the pollen. If we have too much wind, we have a tornado, right? So the internal atmosphere, sort of where our mental state is at any given moment, can have a lot of influence into how our affirmations work, how they feel, how quickly they come into fruition. And this is really important. The difference here is that we have some control over the weather that's inside of us, right? We don't really have any control over the external weather, right? Whatever is going to happen in nature is going to happen. But our internal weather, we do have some control over it here. So we can choose to interface with our internal atmosphere in a way that's like a little more nurturing, a little more peaceful, a little more calm. And all of that is very important. And with that, there are a couple of asterisks, a couple of sidebars that I feel inspired to mention. First, we have to acknowledge the fact that we cannot always change the weather inside, right? Sometimes we're dealing with stuff that makes it really hard for us to think positive, right? To change the way we're feeling, to change the weather inside that we have control over. And sometimes there are external circumstances, right? Things that are happening in life that make it very difficult for us to step into these places. So I am going to talk a bit more about that later, but I want to just mention that we're going to come back to that, because I think there will be people who will hear this idea of being intentional with your mental atmosphere and being like, easier said than done. And it is easier said than done. So we're going to come back to that, but let's move on for now. So how do I think affirmations work? First, let me mention something, a little bit of pop reference here, which is the book, the movie, The Secret. I watched it, I read the book, and this is not that. While we're using the word affirmation and they use the word affirmation, I think this couldn't be further from what is happening in that movie, which really gave a bad rap. Remember how popular and what a big deal that was for like a minute, and now no one talks about it, right? There's a reason for that. The Secret was ultra materialistic and hyper capitalist, right? If you think about all of the content in that movie and the book, it was all about stuff. Give me things, give me the car, the house. I remember the guy being so pumped that his dream board was like this car and this house with this pool and this exclusive neighborhood, and like that he manifested that, and he was like, now I'm happy. Now I have all the things. And I'm thinking, man, you're also like in that part of California where things set on fire. So if you lose all of that stuff, your happiness burns up too. You know, that it's not anchored in deep spiritual practice. It's not real happiness, right? So not to discredit how nice it is to have nice things, right? That's important. And I think if that's what you want, go get it. But to limit this work to that when we could go deeper, I think is a disservice to the work. I also think that the secret and a lot of the stuff around it tended to prey on people who were going through stuff, real stuff, right? The secret, the way that it was marketed, the way the verbiage was, for me, smacked of preying on people who were struggling with finances, who were struggling with terminal or chronic illness or mental health. It preyed on people who were in societal structural situations that were preventing them from making the same growth and development that people in more privileged situations could make. It was really gross to me, to be perfectly honest. So this is not that. The secret also really just ignored all neurodivergent states of people and kind of expected everybody else to do the same thing and to play on the same level. You know, if people who were struggling with mental illness or other kinds of illness could think their way out of it, let me be the first to tell you, we would have done it by now. You don't think people thought about that? So the secret is not this. If you think that's the direction we're going, I apologize for the tangent, but absolutely not. Hopefully, though, that gets you inspired to think about this in new ways and to get curious about where we are going to go with this. Got little grasses hanging out and tuck you guys right there. Second, this work, as I mentioned earlier, is not new. I think about the practice of Galder and Cedar in Old Norse and Old English, which is a magical sorceress tradition that is based entirely on verbal incantation, of charm, of spell that is spoken. This traditions of Galder, while I know very little, and I'm of course by no means an expert, when I read about them and I read about the way they were composed and what was being said and how it was being said, I cannot help but think about affirmative work that these people who were very able to gather the fullness of themselves into what they said, which is a practice in and of itself, and of course onboard whatever spiritual allies they may have had, were working in these affirmative statements of saying things as though they were happening now, they were true, they were in reality. And so there are, I'm sure, countless other examples, but my mind always goes back to Galder and how the power of the spoken word is nothing new to us. It's nothing we haven't already done before. So I think that's really interesting. Finally, the good stuff. The symbol and the map and the gateway of the world tree and the plants themselves, really, especially trees, but all plants, really teach us about affirmations and mental atmosphere. Some of those things being that what we sow will come to fruition, right? The seed that we put into the fertile ground of our inner being will sprout. It will grow into something. So whether those seeds are affirmative and positive and healthy, or they're negative, and destructive and toxic, we have a lot of control over that, of what seeds get sown in our garden. And the trees will constantly teach us, hey, what you put in the dirt is going to come into fruition. What you are ruminating on, what you have going on in there means something, and one day it will turn into something real. The trees also teach us, the world tree symbol also teaches us that the nature of life is to draw from the unseen, from below, from the darkness, right? So trees draw from the soil, from that which cannot be seen, and bring it up into manifestation, into fruition. Similarly, as human persons, we draw from the dark depths of our subconscious, the different layers of our different subtle bodies, and draw that up into manifestation. So we are, in effect, working this root to fruit system when we do affirmative work, and it's quite powerful. I also like to think about the fact that within every fruit is a seed that reflects the plant that made the fruit, right? So everything that we create, everything that we affirm, has within it the potential to further that magic, right? To keep it going, to keep evolving into the work. If our atmosphere is negative, hopeless, pessimistic, self-depreciating, and so on, it's very difficult for things to grow and be happy in that environment. So we want to focus on, as much as possible, the good things, the growing conditions of a tree, have a great deal of influence on how healthy that tree is, how long the tree lives, how strong the tree gets, how many fruits the tree makes. So we want to create as much of a fertile soil environment as we possibly can. And I think that it bears repeating here that we can't always control the weather. There are circumstances in life that can prevent us from creating the environment where we want to thrive. We all go through stuff, some people more than others. It's not a quantity or quality competition, but I just want to say that, we can't think ourselves out of some of our life situations, and there are sometimes things that happen around us that prevent us from getting into this work. And so we do what we can do. We do it on whatever scale we're able to do it. We meet ourselves where we are, right? We grow plants in our garden that are bioregionally appropriate for what's going on. So if all you can do is start in the smallest way, that's fine. One of my gripes with The Secret, and a lot of the ways that this stuff gets talked about, is that the expectations are so high without taking into consideration where people are starting, what their environment is, how fertile their soil is to begin with, what the circumstances of their life may be. There are no magic pills, and there are no finger snaps that fix all the problems, right? So we start where we start, and that's okay. You gotta be really gentle on yourself, especially folks that have tough situations or maybe struggle with different mental health issues that make it hard to do some of this stuff. Be gentle, take it slow. There's no rush and there's no right. If it feels good, if it feels like you're doing something good for yourself and making progress, you probably are, right? So we do what we can do. There was a time for me personally where doing this kind of work felt insurmountable. Sitting with myself in the way that I needed to even define what I wanted and what I wanted to create was pretty much impossible. So I started just whittling away, chipping away at it, in the tiniest little bites. And now I feel quite confident in the work. So I speak to those caveats from personal experience. So when we watch the trees, we see how fruits come from a seed of potential, which is nourished by atmosphere, mental atmosphere. So the affirmations are nourished by internal state. In other words, the things that come into fruition in our lives begin with a seed planted deep in the dark depths of our inner realities. And to me, that's the real magic of this work. So we see then that this process of singing, chanting, rhyming, poetry, affirming, shouting, charming, all of that stuff is one which is fully supported by what the plant spirits teach. This is something reflected by the cosmos, reflected by nature, and when we're doing it, we are stepping into the flow of natural magic, and we're participating in the way that the world itself does things. And when we do that, we are swimming with the current rather than against it, which I think is nice. And the plant spirits do help with this. A couple of ideas and ways that you can bring the plants into this. You can journey with plants that have an affinity for the thing that you're working on. Maybe imagining, bringing that plant in through medicine and ritual, maybe imagining that plant being with you or working with the seeds of that plant as symbolic for the seeds that you are planting, carrying, the plant with you as an amulet, or doing deeper ritual work with that plant. We can, should we get lost or confused or hopeless or dejected or whatever, we can always turn to the plant allies to remind us how things work, right? They're always exhibiting that flow of drawing up, fruition, returning, drawing up, fruition, returning, birth, life, death, rebirth. That lesson is always being exhibited in spring, summer, winter. So we can turn back to them always as our great teachers. They will always be present for us. They will always show us what's up. And that's very good. So I work with affirmations and mental atmosphere a lot in my personal work. In fact, I think some form of it plays a role in pretty much every act of magic, every act of medicine I do. I'm always kind of chanting to the herbs, not always out loud, but there's always some kind of a statement or an ask or a petition. If you've ever taken a tincture that I've made or carried a sachet that I've sewn or put on an anointing oil, this has been part of that process. So, it's a really big part of what I do and how I do it. So I like to say, visualize, verbalize, and visualize and feel the goal all at once, right? Say the words, see the thing as happened, existing in the present, and to have some feeling to accompany it, that excitement or that willingness or vulnerability or whatever the case may be. Those three things come together in this work and make a lot of magic. So saying a phrase like free breathing, right? If I was making a respiratory formula for somebody, while visualizing the individual I'm crafting the medicine for being in perfect respiratory health and experiencing in my feelings, my feeling body, right? The peace, the ease, and the joy that comes with being able to breathe effortlessly, to have the inhalation be open and free and the exhalation open and free, and to be nourished and feel connected to that process, all while the medicine is being compounded for an individual. And also while being aware of the presence of the plant spirits, right? There are just kind of layers and layers you can build on this. There is so much magic in this, actually. If you can sort of take on just that part, just what I just said, then you can understand so much and put it into practice, and you will see your results in magic and medicine amplify exponentially. Finally, I try to always be mindful of the ways of the world trees flow, right? Roots to trunk, to canopy, to fruits. It informs so much of what I do. This symbol of the world tree that we see reflected in culture after culture, time after time, is there for a reason. It has the accolade that it does for a reason, because it works and it will bring us back into the truth all the time. So hopefully some aspects of the way that I do affirmative work will be inspiring to some of you. Maybe this gave you some ideas on different things to look at or different ways to approach the work or approach what is happening inside, and how that mental atmosphere, plays such a big role in what we're able to accomplish. And I will say, this for me is a constant practice. I constantly have to keep what's happening inside, what I'm ruminating on, what I'm thinking about, sometimes what I'm obsessing about, as positive as I can. A lot of my work is about letting shit go. That's on just kind of on a personal level. Not holding on to the things that are hurtful, are negative, are toxic, because I will, right? There's some part of my wiring that feels safe to hold on to these things. Like I keep them and I'm like, now I know what they look like, and I can protect myself from them happening again. But the weight of carrying that stuff around is not worth it. So, and I know I am protected in other ways. So for me, this has been a daily practice all day long, catching myself circling the drain, spiraling downwards, and saying, I want to do that. I want to do that. Do something different. So please play with this. Bring this into your plant spirit work, especially the crafting of magic and medicine, and see how it changes the feel of the process, and then, of course, how it changes the outcome. I think you'll be very surprised. Before I wrap up here, because this was going to be an advanced class and then I kind of condensed it and made it work for a Friday class, I just want to express some deep gratitude to, there are several folks who are, really going above and beyond to support my work, to allow me to keep doing this, to invest in things like this fancy new lapel mic that I just got. So hopefully the audio is better than it's been. Over on Patreon. Thank you so much for allowing me to do what I do. It means a lot to me. If you're interested in being part of that, you can contribute $3 a month. It adds up. It goes a long way. The highest amount you can contribute is $18 a month, which gives you open access to everything I do, including all the courses, the advanced classes, the guided plant journeys, everything. So if you want to go a little deeper, that's all there. There's a link down in the deets for you. And with that, I will send you out into the world with blessings of peace and plenty, and hopefully good tidings of good internal atmosphere and much positive mental affirmations and all of that good stuff. I'll see you next time.